सो आज हमारे साथ है आकांक्षा जी जो कि सिलेक्टेड है वर्ल्ड की टॉप यूनिवर्सिटीज में। सो वेलकम आकांक्षा जी। तो आप अपना एक शॉर्ट
Thank you for
इंट्रोडक्शन।
inviting me.
थैंक यू। सो आप एक अपना एक शॉर्ट इंट्रोडक्शन दे
Yeah. My name is Akanksha, as you have already heard. I'm from UP, and I'm a postgraduate student at IIT Bombay in the Department of Chemistry. And recently, I got selected for a PhD program in different universities in the USA, like University of Chicago, University of Minnesota, Johns Hopkins, and University of Pittsburgh. And I have decided to go to University of Minnesota for my PhD in chemical theory and computation. So yeah, that's about it.
So thank you so much, Akanksha ji. So my first question is how it felt when we got selected in world top universities and you are selected in top 4 universities. So how does it feel?
Yeah, it obviously feels amazing. I mean, I didn't know it could happen, but then it did happen. So yeah, it feels amazing.
So let's start from the beginning. So how do you get interest in chemistry after 12? You can select a different subject, but why you choose chemistry for your career? Yeah.
So for that, I think the credit goes to my chemistry teacher in my secondary education. Like he was very much enthusiastic about the subject, and he like put me through it, and he like made me interested in all the reactions, all the energetics, and how the thing actually goes. So he was the one who like made me go in this path of career. So yeah.
So
This is the subject I feel most for.
Yeah. Okay. So from where did you complete your graduation?
After completing my schooling in my hometown itself, I went to Delhi. There I did my bachelor's from Hansraj College in Delhi University, and I did BSc Honors Chemistry. So yeah, that was my chemistry majors.
So tell us about your journey through your graduation to your post-graduation till IIT Bombay, due to IIT Bombay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Like as I said, I knew from the start that I wanted to build my career in the field of chemistry. I was very much interested in the subject. So I think let's go for masters. And the obvious choice is go for IIT JAM, right? So yeah, I started preparing for IIT JAM in my second year, and luckily I got a decent AIR and got admitted to IIT Bombay. And in IIT Bombay, I got some amazing professors who motivated me to go further for PhD. So yeah, now I'm going for a PhD.
So how you got interest in research, or why you decided to do PhD after masters rather than going for job?
So the main reason would be I don't think I'm still ready to go for a job yet. I don't think I have adulting in me right now. So like this is a kind of delay in adulting reason. The main reason would be I was very much interested in research right from the start. Like I wanted to know how things work. I wanted to know like uh, how a reaction is built from scratch. Like these are just some written schematics in a book, but I wanted to know how these reactions are built from scratch, how we actually do the process. Like right now, I don't want to do reactions, but still, I'm very much interested in it.
So could you tell us something about your research project, your MSc project? What you did?
My MSc project was in theoretical and computational chemistry. It was based on the doorway mechanism to the anionic states of hexachlorobenzene and 9-phenolphthaleate. So my major work was to understand this doorway mechanism by which transition takes place from one kind of anionic state to the other kind of anionic state. And this transition is studied on the basis of the energetics that follows, the potential energy diagram. So my major work was doing the computations, understanding the orbital diagrams, and understanding all the energy curves.
So do you think that this MSc project inspired you more for going to PhD?
Definitely, definitely. Because in my bachelor's, I took some courses like there was molecular modeling and drug designing. There was this coding and chemistry type of course, which taught me Q basics. So these and obviously quantum chemistry and spectroscopy. So these courses were more on the theoretical side, and I found myself more interested in these kind of topics rather than going for organic or inorganic synthesis type of research labs. So when I took these courses, I think I can go with it. I was good at maths, so I was not struggling that much. So I think I can go for it. Then I started. I started taking some online courses so that I can know the field better. I started watching some YouTube videos of some renowned professors from the world. So yeah, that made me interested. And when I started doing my master's project, so my master project was itself based on theoretical and computational chemistry. So when I started doing my master's project, so it gave me a general idea like how things work, how do we study these research papers, how do we find a problem, how do we find solutions to our problems. And it gave me an idea and also a motivation that I can do this thing that I think I want to do. So yeah, that was my starting point to think that yes, I want to do research. And also my master's advisor was the biggest motivation, I must say, in the entire process, because he motivated me throughout all the process. He gave me the specific points, what to do, what not to do during the procedure. So yeah.
So, yeah. So, if I ask you how you find your research interest, I mean, you said that you are specific in the computational, in the theoretical part. So, if I'm
So
saying the beginning or the how you are being specific that I want to go in this field, I mean, for the research.
so for me, it worked out because I took some courses in my bachelor's and I found them very interesting and they were entirely new to me. I didn't know how computational chemistry worked. I didn't know like we can do coding in chemistry. I really didn't know at that time. So it was entirely new and it was very fascinating. I was very much devoting my time to these two courses. So yeah, that made me interested. So, but like in general, if I can say, you can find your area of interest by looking into different options. Like you can know what works best for you only when you look for each and every option. So, you start taking some courses on biochemistry, on theoretical chemistry, on organic synthesis and inorganic synthesis. Like look for every option and then start shortlisting what works best for you. What puts your mind into thoughts. What really motivates you to do your research, because you are going to do it for a very long time. So you must have a very strong motivation.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's an inspiring story. So, yeah. So, my next question is, why you want to do PhD from abroad rather than doing it from India? Yeah, that's a
I
specific
don't
question.
think I have a definite answer for that. Like, it was just that I did from bachelor's from Delhi University and then my master's from IIT Bombay. So I thought, let's go somewhere else. So yeah, that's about it. And also, when I talked to my seniors and my professors, they said, because they said that I was already in India, I was already in some premium institutes, so I had good connections in that. So if I go abroad, I'll have a different culture. I'll deal with different struggles. I'll learn different things, and I'll have connections with connections abroad, connections worldwide. So it was a good thing to do. As after your PhD, when you go for job or other things, you need those connections. You need to know how things worldwide, because research is not just a domestic thing; it's a worldwide thing. You should know what is going on around the world. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and why you have just applied for US, not Europe? What is any specific
Uh,
reason?
so so yeah, my specific reason would be I didn't have much research experience before applying for the universities, before applying for PhD. I just had my master's thesis project. So in the US, the difference is they have this 5 to 6 years of research program, right? And in the first year, they like develop your thinking to do your research in that particular field. Like you have to take up some courses, you have to select your lab by doing lab rotations and everything. But in US, the research program is just for 3 to 4 years, where you have to just exhaustively do your lab work. So I thought US is a better option for me because it will provide me like a better environment, as I already didn't have much experience.
How you shortlist university for your application, yeah, for applying? Because there are in US there are many universities. So how you selected
Yeah.
that this particular university I will go for, I will apply? So how you made your
Uh,
list?
Hmm. So I think this is the most crucial part of the application, and for me, it took a lot of time, seriously. So what I did was I started by figuring out the budget, like how many universities I want to finally fill the application for, because it is USA and the application fees is very costly. It is around $100 for each university, and the procedure itself becomes very expensive. So I had to like make up my mind, like finally I want to apply for this number of universities. Then I started making a list using world rankings or reports that I could find relevant to my field. There are many world reports which list these universities on the basis of particular fields. Like I searched for theoretical chemistry, you can search for your field of interest. So yeah, and then I started searching for which universities and which professor published the most exciting research papers. So for that, I didn't know what was most exciting because I found everything exciting. So for me, that work was I asked my research advisor, master research advisor, because he knew what my interest was, because I had a one-on-one discussion with him in the starting of my project. So he helped me a lot. He told me about for how can I go about it, what criteria I can use to shortlist, and yeah, like what should I prioritize and what should I not. So these are the things that helped me a lot. And then when I made that list of all the list of all the universities that from which I will choose for the further rounds. So what I did was I gave mock GRE and TOEFL test. So after giving your mock GRE and TOEFL test, these tests actually act as cutoffs for your application. So like every different university have a particular cutoff for these tests. So yeah, so when I gave these mock GRE tests, I had an idea like what score I'm going to get. It's not exact, but at least you'll get an idea like at what point you are, or you already are. So after these tests, what I did was I started shortlisting these universities and made like divided them into subgroups. Like these are the universities who are going above the score which I'm getting. These are the universities in my score range, and these are the universities which ask for the scores lower than what I'm getting. So, and then from these or 3 or 4 subgroups, start picking out the universities that you finally want to apply for. Go to their websites every day. Go to every professor's personal website. And in the USA, there is this provision, you don't pick out your PhD advisor beforehand. You will only get to choose the advisor when you join the university in the first semester. So like it's not fixed that you'll be working in a particular professor's lab. So it's always a good choice to have 3 or more professors in a particular university in which you want to work for. So start shortlisting these universities on that basis. Like each university must have 2 to 3 professors, which you can easily see yourself working for. So yeah, so then finally I picked out my last set of universities. So say if you want to finally apply for 10 universities, pick out 2 universities from very high ranking, Ivy Leagues, if you will, and then pick out 5 universities in the category you fall into, and then pick out the rest from the grad schools which demand lower standardized scores than you think you'll get in GRE and TOEFL. So yeah, this worked for me. And in the final list, try to include as much detail as possible about the deadlines, about the requirements, about the contact IDs and everything, so that like you don't have to every time go to their website and search for a particular thing. Try to make a list as exhaustive as possible. So yeah, that worked for me. I hope it helps you too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, Akanshi, second, my next question is: could you explain the application process for US? How did you apply,
Okay.
and what is the process? Yeah.
Okay, so in the USA universities, these universities for the graduate program, they ask for 2 standardized scores. One is aptitude test, which is GRE, and second is a proficiency test, which is IELTS or TOEFL. So some universities go with TOEFL score, some university go with IELTS score. You can check that on each university's website and make your choice which exam you want to give. So yeah, so GRE is basically an aptitude test. It has 3 sections: quant, verbal, and third is analytical writing. And TOEFL, as I said, is a proficiency exam. It has 4 sections: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. So you have to first start preparing for these 2 exams if you want to apply for US universities. After you like give these exams, after you start preparing for these exams, next thing is you have to shortlist the US universities that you want to apply for, right? So you have to make an exhaustive list of final list, like 10 or 15 universities that you want to apply for. And then these GRE and TOEFL scores, like when you are giving these exams, they have the option of sending out the scores to four universities for free. So you have to make your list before giving these exams. Okay, so out of the list that you have to pick 4 your topmost choice universities, 4 topmost choice universities, and then fill them up in GRE and TOEFL exams at your university of choice, and they will send out your score directly to the university. Okay, so these GRE and TOEFL have this provision of sending your scores directly to the university. You cannot mail them a PDF or something. They have to be sent directly from their websites. Okay, yeah. And then after making the list, after giving the exams, you have to fill out the application, which is very long. So start preparing beforehand, start filling out that on time. Okay, and yeah, so you have to fill out your personal details. They ask for your resume, your diversity statement, your personal statement, your statement of purpose, and yeah, mostly universities ask for these documents. And your awards that you have got, any research that you may have published, any research that you are still working on at the time of application. And yeah, okay. And after filling out this application, you have to ask for recommendations from your professors. So you have to give at least 3 recommendations, uh, out of which one must be from a professor under which you have had a research experience. So most of the universities particularly list that one recommendation must be from such professor. So make sure of that. And yeah, so after getting the recommendation, uploading all the necessary documents, and sending out the scores on time to the university, you have to pay a fees, and then yeah, yeah, your application is filled, and then you are ready to go.
Yeah. So yeah. So could you tell us when we got the result from university that we got selected or whatever? When the result,
Okay,
yeah, and the application deadline for US?
Okay, so mostly the deadline falls on in December. Some of them were on 1st December, some of them were on 6th December, and some of them were on 15th December. So mostly they were in first half of December. And I got my result, like decision, on 22nd December. First decision on 22nd December for the University of Minnesota, and then for University of Chicago on 25th December. So yeah, it can go from like December to March. You can anytime get your decision. So you don't have to worry if you don't get your confirmation in December itself.
For US application, when it is start, then I mean, when we can start when we can start the filling
So
application form?
okay, so I actually don't remember when the applications start opening up, but I think they open up around August or September. I'm not really sure. You can check that on the website, but I think they start from August and September.
Yeah. So my next question is, what is the important criteria for selection in US universities? What do you think?
Okay, so I don't really know what is the definite criteria for selection, but from the blogs that I've read and from the webinars that I attended during my application process, I can say that GRE and TOEFL scores mainly act as cutoffs. They are used to filter out thousands of applications and like shortlist some of the candidates of whom they want to study the application very thoroughly. And then they have this step by step procedure. First the application is studied by the grad committee that they have. Then it goes to then it goes to your particular department of choice. Like mine went to Department of Chemistry, and there some of the professors, they look through your application, they look through your statement of purpose, your resume, your research experience, and then they make a choice if you are suitable for the department or not. So because statement of purpose is like this is the document that represents your motivation to join the university and the program, and it more or less represent how much you are capable enough to join the department. So yeah, it is a very important thing that reflects in your document. It should be very engaging and like very personal.
So my next question is, how to build a strong profile and when one should working for it, and when one should start working for it?
Okay, so I think this is a continuous process. Like you cannot do this overnight. So as soon as you find your area of interest, you can start working on it from right then. Like if you know your topic of interest, you can start taking up online courses. You can start doing some online projects. I'm saying online because of this COVID situation, but obviously you can join internships and projects in different universities and different institutes. And like if you want to go for academics, you can start teaching up in different institutes for like a part-time thing, because in USA you have this uh, TA-ship program that you have to do for the first or second year, for the first 2 years. Where you have to teach the undergraduate students, not basically teach, but you have to like take recitations sessions or the lab sessions, and you have to help them with the topics. So they look for candidates who will be suitable for that job, because they'll be providing stipend on the basis of that job. So if you are interested in academics, try building up your profile on that basis. If you are interested in jobs, obviously start looking out for job like internships in particular industries, or as I said, it's not something that you build overnight, but you can start working on it if you find your topic of interest.
Yeah. So yeah, as you said, the TA-ship or the academic teaching will help us in the
Hmm.
building a strong profile. So do you think if someone have a teaching experience, one should mention it in the resume and it will help for the selection process also? I mean,
I mean,
is it a good thing?
Yeah, I had a few internships, I had a few teaching internships actually. So I mentioned that on resume. So on the basis of that, I can say we can mention that, but I cannot say for sure. But it worked for me, so I hope that it works for you too.
Okay, so my most one of the most burning question: how to write an outstanding SOP? Yeah, so that's my
Uh,
burning question.
the statement of purpose is something that is going to represent your true intentions to join the university and that particular department, right? So, try to make it as engaging and as appealing as possible. So, it must be your selling point and it should represent your motivation very clearly. So the important things to highlight are why that university is helpful to you and also how can you be beneficial to them? Like why should they pay attention to you in particular? So these are some of the questions that are generally asked in PhD interviews, and these questions help in the judgment if the candidate is the right choice for the program. Such as like why do you want to do PhD and specifically in that particular field, right? After having so and so degree. So if you are applying for a PhD, you must have already have a bachelor's degree and even a master's degree. So why are you applying for a third degree in chemistry or even a second degree in chemistry? So not particular chemistry, whatever field that you are applying for. So and second question is why did you choose that university and why do you want to work in those particular labs and what makes you a better candidate than the rest? So, and if you get selected, what more can you bring to the table than what you have already shown in your resume, right? So, you fill these applications, like if you're filling out these applications in the third semester of your master's, so they have your information up to that point. They do not know what you're going to do in the fourth semester or even in the summer. So you should give an idea what courses you will take in fourth semester, and those courses, try to make those courses as relevant as possible to the field because it will show your dedication towards that particular field. Try to list the things that you will do in the summer, so that it shows them that you are very excited to join the lab and you are working very hard for it. Okay. Yeah, next question would be how is your current research experience helpful in the growth of their labs and department? So, yeah, how are you beneficial to them? It works both ways, right? You cannot choose them, you cannot say them that, yeah, this university is helpful to you. You must be helpful to them also. So, you have to include both points. So, yeah. And next thing to include is what are your future goals after PhD, and how do you think that university is helpful or is going to be helpful in achieving that particular goal, right? So if you want to go for job, try to look in your department website which industries they have tie up with, which industries their students mostly go for, and try to list those industries and try to list that you went to that particular website, went to that particular magazine, like do an exhaustive research as much as you can about the university and try to include everything. Show them that you were like you did not just apply to the university because it has high ranking. You have to show them that it is good for you and you are good for them. So yeah, on the basis of these questions, choose a particular format of your choice, and then build the SOP around it and try to make it relate as much as possible. Like keep it as relevant and as convincing as possible. And after you have your first draft, proofread it multiple times. Like do not just proofread it 3 or 4 times in a day. Like do it once, then give it to someone else, try it, ask them for help, try to ask them to figure out all of your mistakes in English and which sentence does not seem convincing, which sentence does not make any sense or like anything. Try to ask them for as much help, And then again after a week or after some days, you again proofread it. Like you have to go through it multiple times in multiple stages, and then when you get your final draft, you are good to go.
Yeah. So one of my question in this that did you make specific SOPs for different universities, or what did you change make changes when you apply for different
Okay.
SOPs?
Yeah. Yes, I did make a particular SOP for each university. I did not just make one draft for all the university that I was applying for. The reason was that because my format was I wanted to show how that particular university is helpful for me. Right. So every university had a different selling point. Like one university had a particular uh, so my future goal is I want to go for academics, right? So I wanted to select a university which has this particular program where they can teach me how to teach, right? So I started looking up for these programs in all of the universities. So some of the universities had very great programs, like they teach how to build up a portfolio, how to build up a course, how to give presentations and everything. So I included those particular programs in my SOP. I made sure that it was personal and particular to that university. Yeah. So the common points were why I want to go for PhD, what was my motivation behind it, and what I'll be doing in the next upcoming semester and the summer session. And the different points in each of the SOP were how can I be beneficial to the university, which labs I want to choose, and why that particular university I'm applying for. So, yeah.
Thank you. So yeah. So my next question is how you get the best recommendation from professors, because yeah, recommendation matter a lot. So
Yes,
yeah.
of course it does. So, I guess the best choice would be to establish a good rapport with the professors. I mean, try to get recommendation from those professors who are already working in the field that you're interested in. So, it will make it very relevant. It will convince the selection committee that you are already in good rapport with some of the professors in the field. And if the professors know you enough about your academic knowledge, working behavior, and also the weaknesses, they will definitely write a good recommendation. So you just have to ask them in advance and give them enough time to think and cater to your request.
Yeah. So one of my question in the, as you mentioned about the GRE and TOEFL, what do you think is a, you can say it is a good score for GRE and TOEFL? What do you consider as a
So
good score?
there is, yeah. So there is not a one particular score that I can say is like you should have scores above that, because as I said, these scores are just used as a cutoff for filtering out the applications. And if even it's not that if you get a bad GRE or TOEFL scores, you won't get selected. This I have read in multiple blogs and even on the university's grad websites, that they do not just filter out the applications if you get a bad GRE scores. They look the application as a whole thing. So if even if you have a do not get the scores that you wanted, and you have a great research experience, have a great SOP, they will look at your application. This is what they have specifically mentioned in each and every university's website. So like do not lose hope if you get not so decent GRE or TOEFL schools. So, and for the preparation, I think there are many online resources like Magoosh and Princeton Review, and there are many YouTube channels which help with that. And there are also some of the books that help in developing your skills, because in GRE they have like very high vocabulary English, and we do not use that kind of English in our day-to-day usage, right? So you have to build up your vocabulary according to that. So you have to start preparing like on the basis of what you think, how much time you'll need.
Yeah. So yeah, my next question is also on this. Then, what do you think? I mean, how did you prepare for the GRE and TOEFL? What is your? I mean, you can say your short journey about how did you get good score in the GRE and TOEFL? How did you prepare, and how much time you devoted to this part?
So yeah, I took help of the Magoosh. It's an online learning platform, and they have very interesting videos. Like they have video lessons for each and every topic where they just tell you the tricks and how to solve each and every questions. So these video lessons are short, engaging, and very easy to learn. You just have to keep on practicing them because you get very less time during the actual examination, so you have to be quick and you have to be correct. So yeah, so I took help of Magoosh and I gave the practice test on their websites. So yeah, it helped me prepare for the exam. And how long did I take? So I think like for the GRE I took around 40 days, I think. Like not like I started preparing for day to night, and for 40 days just devoted like 2 to 3 hours daily, something like that. And in the end I did went from day to night, so it was my personal choice. And for TOEFL I took around a month after giving my GRE exam. So yeah.
So yeah, so did GRE preparation you help you also in the TOEFL exam, or is they are both are similar or something, or there's a differences in
So
both exams?
yeah, so the reading section and the writing section are more or less similar. Not exactly similar, but because like in the TOEFL, the reading section is very long. Like you have 7 to 8 paragraph long passage, so you have to be very quick and you have to solve that passage in 20 minutes. So it's very long, but it does help because you have practice from the GRE exam. And also in the writing, because GRE have this analytical writing section, and also TOEFL have this writing section. So it is more or less similar. You just have to practice and make sure you include all the points, and make sure you have a precise format, because you don't get enough time to think at that particular time. You have to have a particular format in your mind while you start giving the exam or while you start preparing for the exam. So you have to these things beforehand. So yeah, talking about the remaining sections of the TOEFL. So these are speaking and listening, right? So this proficiency exam of English, which is TOEFL, this is basically based in an academic environment. They usually have the conversations which you listen to or take part in colleges or universities, right? Like you talk to your professor, or you talk to your TA, you talk to your librarian, you talk among your peers, and you discuss your problems. Right. So what they do is, in the speaking section, for example, they will give you a very neutral topic, right? They won't give you anything that you will have to use your mind. They will give you topics like which room in your home you like the best. So this is just your personal choice. You don't have to like put your brains into it. Just be quick about it. And in the listening section, what they do is they give you a voice note, and that voice note will be of a professor who is giving an introductory lecture on a particular topic. You have to listen to that voice note, and then after listening to it you have to answer some of the questions. They can be some optional questions, they can be a writing section. So yeah, that's about it.
So my next question is, as you said, in the TOEFL we have two remaining part, like listening and speaking part. So how did you prepare for that part? Yeah.
Okay. So ETS actually conducts the TOEFL exam, and they have this preparatory course on their website, which you can take. They have some voice notes which you can prepare before the exam. And also on the internet you can find many documents, many PDF which list some of these sections. Like they'll give you voice notes. You may not find questions to answer, but you will get an idea like how you will have to listen to the voice notes, and also how do you need to make notes while listening to that particular audio, right? Because those notes will be very helpful while you're answering the question. You cannot listen to that audio again. It is just played one time. So you have to listen to it. You have to make short notes along with it, and then answer the questions on the basis of that. So that you'll need to practice beforehand. And for that, you can take help of online resources, as I said, because there are many like drive links given on the internet. There are many YouTube channels that help with that. So you can like make use of that.
How did you prepare the vocabulary section for the GRE? I mean, for the
Okay.
vocabulary session, what did you do? Because it's something
Okay.
that we should do in the daily routine.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, so as I said, I took help from the Magoosh Resource Center, right? So they have this flashcards for improving your vocabulary, because in GRE, they have a particular set of words that they extensively use in each and every GRE exam, right? And GRE and TOEFL exams are very secretive. I don't know what a particular word is for that, because they do not reveal their actual exam that student gets.
So my next question
Mhm.
is, could you tell us the expenses throughout the application process? I mean, how, because, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it is very expensive. So first you have to give GRE and TOEFL exams, which like combinedly cost me around 27,000 rupees, I guess. And then if you want to give GRE subject exam, so you have to pay for that. I didn't give that exam. So, and apart from these, you have to fill out the applications, and each application is around 90 to $100. So if you're applying for 10 universities, that goes around $1,000, which is 70,000 rupees. So yeah, these are, or and also yeah, GR and TOEFL have this provision of sending out only 4 scores to the universities. Right. So if you're applying for 10 universities, for the rest 6 universities, you have to pay an additional fees for sending those GR and TOEFL scores to the university. So that is like an additional expense for this application process.
Yeah. But once you get selected, it is worth it. Yeah, you can.
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah. So my next question is related to that. So how much stipend we get in US universities, and what do you think? What is the cost of living there, and and how much you can save per month there? I mean, what your idea about it?
Okay. So I don't know how much we can save. That I'll only know when I move there. But from the seniors that I've talked to, they say it's enough to have a decent living. Like you can pay your rent, you can pay your utilities or everything. You can also save something for your recreational activities like hiking or going on a trip or something. So yeah, it basically depends how lavish lifestyle you want to live in the US. So the stipend that the particular university provides, it's enough to have a decent lifestyle that they have said to me up till now. I don't know about my like I'll tell you about my personal experience when I'll move there. And the stipend that we get, it varies from university to university. So for one university I got $35,000 per year. For one university, I'm getting $27,000 per year. For one, it was 26.5 something. So it depends on the university and how much funding it already has.
Okay, so
So
my next question is, if someone have financial issues and still he or she have very much interest in the research, and he or she want to go for PhD abroad. So what will you tell about the financial? Could he or she help his family after his or her can help his family after getting selected abroad by stipend. So give your your perspective on this.
Okay, as I said, I cannot say this from my personal experience because I'm still in India. And from what I've heard from my seniors, I've started looking for apartments and other utilities and how much it costs and how much is the transportation fees or something. So from that, I think it actually depends on you. So if you have if you have a cycle to go from your apartment to the university, or if you're using the public transportation, it is going to be much cheaper than if you are taking a personal cab every time, or if you are yeah, so if you're taking a personal cab every time. So it actually depends on you, how much can you save, how much can you cut up on your not so necessary lifestyle, right? So in the US, food is very expensive, so you have to cook it by yourself. If you start ordering up every time, like 2 times a day or 3 or 4 times a week, it is obviously going to cost much. So as I said, like, to sum up, it depends on you. If you want to put some of your stipend into your family savings, you have to be as responsible as possible. You have to save up, and you have to cut down your expenses. And yeah, you will lead a decent lifestyle and you will save. This is from what I know right now. I cannot say for sure, but yeah, like, from what I know about the expenses and about the apartment rent and other utilities and the transportation and other medical fees and everything, I think we can save up decent enough to send some of the stipend back to our families to support them.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much. Yeah. From your answer, what I'm getting, if we live a decent life there, I mean, if we cut down our other extra expenses or something, we can save almost in the dollars, or if I convert in the Indian rupees, I can save almost 30 to 40,000 for my family. Yeah.
It more or less depends on your stipend also. Like, some universities provide a very good stipend, some universities do not provide that kind. So it depends on that. So if this is your major concern, you should select a university which is like that you cannot know beforehand actually. But after you have the decision of all the universities, you can select the university which is providing the most stipend if this is your major concern. But also, yeah, professor of your choice must be your biggest priority, I think.
Okay. So my last question, you can say. So my last question is: any last advice for students who want to do PhD from abroad?
Okay. So I think like I want to say is have confidence in yourself, because this application process is entirely new. This is not something that you encounter in India. It is like it is different. So yeah, like, have confidence in yourself. Don't let imposter syndrome kick in. Like, you can do best, you are the best, and just have this much confidence and try to do your best. Try to give as much as possible. Try to show you are the best for the university, and that university is best for you. And if you get interviews for any of the university, uh, like, you just have to sell out yourself. So it's not a big deal. Interviews are very easy-going. They are just a secondary stage. So it's don't worry about that. It's very easy-going. You just have to sell out yourself, and you will do it. You just have to believe in yourself that you are the best. And yeah, that's about it.
Thank you so much. This is very nice talking to you. Thank you so much, Akanksha ji, for coming to my YouTube channel.
So thank you so much, Shravan, for inviting me. I think it is a very great initiative for this interview series. I mean, I think it will help students a lot who are very confused about the process or who need some, confidence to build up about the process and everything. So I think it is very great initiative, and I think for the people who are watching this video, like, share, and subscribe to the SK Chemistry channel.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.